Hello, I am Wilf, and today I'll be talking about my visual design assignment 2. The concept, the main idea behind this piece is that I wanted to replicate a Star Wars weapon, but instead of just copying a recreated, instead of copying a design, I wanted to make one myself. So I wanted to capture the idea of Star Wars, but using a different kind of gun. The way that they did this in the movies is by using military surplus and turning it into something that looks futuristic. For instance, adding a bigger muzzle, removing certain pieces, adding a scope, just little tiny bits, adding heat sinks, just to make it look a bit more futuristic. So before I started, I need to figure out which gun I wanted to use. So I had a look around. It was surprisingly difficult to find one because Star Wars has been around for the better part of 40 years, and there are a lot of guns, and there are a lot of reused guns. That's usually how they design them. So first of all, I had to start off by finding a gun that hadn't been used before. So I didn't go with a gun in the end. I actually went for an air pistol made back very vintage, probably back in the 50s, which is a Webley air pistol. I felt like it had this pretty already unique, almost sci-fi look to it, and as you see at the top, there seems to be this barrel that goes across, which is the actual barrel. But I thought, that could be my first inspiration was that could be a scope, and then if you added a muzzle or just added some extra pieces, it could start to look like something in the Star Wars universe. So first of all, I started off just a sketch, get the idea across. I added a scope, a muzzle, and a sort of battery pack, just something extra to go on that larger barrel at the bottom. This is where I got a lot of my inspiration from. Of course, I looked at more images, but just to get the idea across, you can see where I got the inspiration from for some of the add-ons. It seems like they have a pretty fixed idea on how to make these guns look like Star Wars, which was what I was trying to replicate. Now, I got onto the modelling straight on. I started with just a very simple cylinder and extruded that out, creating another one, and just starting to create the shape. Originally, I would use several standard primitives, but for this, I actually found a way to essentially create it from just one barrel, including the handle, as you can see here. So I had modelled it off the barrel by making the handle grip in it, and adding on. Of course, there were some parts like this barrel here that were not part of the original standard primitive, but it was still very interesting to just work off one standard primitive. For the blaster pieces, I kept them as separate models because in the future I was thinking like, maybe I could try and replicate the original model just for the sake of it. So they were separated, but that wouldn't be a problem when it came to Unreal. Now I got on to the texturing phase. First, I started off the unwrap. Now, because they were separate models, I had to create essentially a texture atlas with this. So I unwrapped it and made sure that the base gun was on one side, and then all the Star Warsy bits on the other side. Plain, simple, still enough room to get some good textures in. Here's what the texture atlas looked like combined. First texture I wanted to create was just a raw, unused blaster, something that's just off the factory. Maybe a couple of scratches from the production process, but no real wear. It was a great way to, almost like a blank canvas, to start painting on a bit of history behind this Star Wars blaster, because I also wanted to add a bit of character to it. Next one was used. This time I added a bit more grunge to the details. The wooden stock had a bit more wear and tear after it had been used. The barrel had some burns on it, like steel had been heated up, so it had that nice effect on it, and there was just a bit more grunge to it, and a lot more edge wear too. It's been used a bit more. Then, which will come up later, I wanted to create a really muddy one, just encased in mud, as if it just been dropped on the battlefield, a little hint to what happens in the future. And then, just as a quick little add-on, I decided to make a texture faithful to the original air pistol. So I just created that. I created my own stencil to put on the lines, to put on the wording. So that was actually quite fun. Here's just a quick look at all 4 of them together, all 4 of the textures I created. Here's a quick animation just to show them all. After creating the models, I asked for some feedback, and it kind of seemed like I'd underscoped it, so there was more to add. Apart from little changes, just like less wear, or less, grease in the crevices. I also got the suggestion that I should make a scene out of it, which I thought was a very cool idea. So I decided to create a scene. Now, for the scene, I wanted something a bit more gritty, something a little bit maybe more set in the real world. So I decided to go for the Battle of Mimban from Star Wars, ironically. But it's pretty much based off the First World War, which was quite a gritty, muddy war. And I think that would create quite a cool scene. Because I wanted to add something extra to it, I decided to just quickly model an Imperial officer's cap, which in sort of my headcanon, the gun would have been used by an Imperial officer. So it kind of shows that it's been brand new. They've had it for a while, and they've fallen on the battlefield, dropping it, and it's been stomped into the mud. So setting it up, I did it in Unreal because of the new Lumen. I wanted to have a bit of dampness to it, so I added some puddles, and I added the cap in, and I dredged the blaster into the ground using the landscaping tool. The lighting was quite interesting because I wanted it to still look like it was in an active battlefield. I created my own flashing texture to show off basically explosions going on in the background, and then I also added some blaster bolts that would be zooming past, which you'll be able to see in the trailer, there's a link. In conclusion, this was a very interesting one. I certainly found it a little bit more difficult than I was expecting, but I'm always up for a bit of a challenge, and at the end of the day, I feel like I learned quite a lot from this project, and I've certainly mistakes that I will not make in the future. Just a couple of look at some of the renders that I got in Substance. And then I decided to add a couple of hologram shots, just a simple hologram model that I made that just look like that. They should be GIFs, but I don't think they're working right now for some reason. Anyway, thank you for watching, and this has been my assignment.